I destroyed my relationship with 6 words, and everyone thinks I'm the victim here. They're sending me supportive messages about how he couldn't handle a strong woman, telling me I dodged a bullet. If they knew what really led to those 6 words, they'd understand why he won't even look at my texts anymore. What they don't see is the insecurity that made me weaponize his vulnerability against him. They don't know about the pattern I created, how I systematically turned something he shared in confidence into ammunition. I'm watching him rebuild his life without me in it, and my friends keep asking why I don't just move on from someone who couldn't take a joke. I'm going to explain exactly what happened, including the part I haven't told anyone. The comment that made him pack his things was just the final explosion, but what I did in the 3 months before that, the deliberate choices I made, that's the real story. And there's one specific thing I said to my sister that, if he ever found out, would confirm every reason he has for cutting me out completely. Marcus and I met at a photography exhibition where I dragged myself alone, determined to seem cultured and interesting. He was standing in front of this massive print of a lightning storm, completely absorbed, and when I made some pretentious comment about the composition, he actually engaged with it seriously instead of nodding politely like most people would have. We talked for 2 hours. He had this gentle way of speaking that made me feel like everything I said mattered, which was addictive for someone like me, who'd spent most of her 20s feeling invisible in group conversations. Our first few months felt like discovering a language I'd been trying to speak my whole life. He'd text me photos of random things during his day, a pigeon with one leg, graffiti that made him laugh, the way sunlight hit his coffee cup. I'd never been with someone who noticed small things like that. My previous relationships had been with guys who measured everything in resume bullets and social media moments. The first tiny crack appeared about 4 months in during a dinner party at my friend Shauna's place. The conversation turned to bedroom stuff, the way it does when everyone's had enough wine, and Shauna's boyfriend made some joke about marathon sessions. Marcus shifted beside me, quiet in a way that felt different from his usual thoughtful silence. Later, walking home, I asked if he was okay. He said something vague about feeling like the group conversations sometimes moved faster than he could keep up with. I told him he was overthinking it, kissed him, changed the subject. I noticed he sometimes finished quickly during sex, but it genuinely didn't bother me at the beginning. What we had felt connected and present in ways that mattered more than timing. But I noticed it. And some part of me filed it away, this small thing that made him imperfect that gave me leverage in the back of my mind. I didn't think of it as leverage then. I thought of it as just information. The shift started so gradually I didn't recognize it as a shift. We were watching a movie at his place, some action thing with gratuitous sex scenes, and I made a comment about how unrealistic the stamina was. Like, that would be nice, right? I laughed when I said it. Just a throwaway observation. Marcus laughed too, but his hand tensed slightly where it rested on my leg. I felt that tension, registered it, and some toxic part of my brain marked it as power. A couple weeks later, I made another comment. We just finished having sex and I was scrolling through my phone while he went to the bathroom. When he came back, I showed him some meme about guys who finish too fast, one of those stupid relationship humor posts. This is actually kind of funny though, I said, watching his face. He smiled, said yeah, classic, but I saw something dim behind his eyes. I told myself I was just sharing internet humor. Everyone shares memes, but I knew exactly what I was doing. The pattern established itself over the next month. Little comments always dressed up as jokes or observations, never direct enough that he could call me out without seeming oversensitive. Oh, we're done already? Said with a laugh. That was quick, said affectionately, like it was endearing. I watched him start to tense up before we had sex, noticed him apologizing more, trying different techniques he'd clearly researched online. And instead of feeling bad, I felt something darker. Control. The ability to make him uncertain, to have power in one area of a relationship where I'd always felt like I had to perform perfection myself. My friend Rachel asked me once during brunch how things were going with Marcus. I told her he was great, perfect even, except sometimes the sex is like a sneeze, over before you know it started. She laughed, I laughed. It felt good to share that, to have this secret flaw I could deploy in conversation, proof that even my seemingly perfect relationship had normal problems. What I didn't mention was that I'd started timing him. Literally checking the clock, building a case in my head. Marcus tried to talk to me about it 2 months before everything exploded. We were lying in bed, both pretending to read, and he said, I feel like maybe we should talk about expectations around sex. His voice was so careful, so vulnerable. This was my moment to be a decent human being, to have an actual conversation about intimacy and pressure and what we both needed. Instead, I said, what do you mean? In this bright, innocent tone that forced him to spell it out. He stumbled through an explanation about feeling anxious, about whether I was satisfied, about wanting to make sure we were communicating. I told him everything was fine, that he was overthinking, that I loved our sex life. I said all the right reassuring words while privately enjoying watching him squirm. The thing is, he wasn't bad in bed. That's what makes this so much worse. He was attentive and generous and present. The actual timing issue was minor, something that could have been worked through with honest communication, something that plenty of couples navigate without it becoming a weapon. But I'd found his soft spot, the place where his confidence wavered, and I couldn't stop pressing on it. I told my sister about it on a phone call, described the whole situation in detail, including the comments I'd been making. "God, that's kind of mean," she said, and I got defensive immediately. "I'm just being honest," I said. "Like, am I supposed to pretend I don't notice? Isn't honesty important in relationships?" She didn't push back, but I could hear the judgment in her silence. Instead of examining why I felt judged, I doubled down internally. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just being real, refusing to fake enthusiasm, maintaining my standards. The night before everything fell apart, we were at a birthday party for one of his coworkers. I'd had a few drinks, enough to feel bold, but not enough to have an excuse. A group of us were standing around the kitchen, and somehow the conversation turned to relationship complaints, that performative kind of griping couples do in social settings. Someone's girlfriend mentioned he left dishes in the sink. Someone's boyfriend talked about her taking forever to get ready. When it came to me, I said, "Well, Marcus is basically perfect, except he makes 2-minute noodles seem like they take a long time." The group laughed. It took them a second to get it, and then the laugh was this mix of shock and amusement that, oh my God, did she really just say that kind of laugh? Marcus's face went completely blank, not angry, not embarrassed, just empty. He excused himself to the bathroom, and when he came back, he said he had a headache and we should go. The drive home was silent. I knew I'd crossed a line, but I was also annoyed that he was being so sensitive. It was just a joke. Everyone makes jokes about their partners. We got home and he went straight to the bedroom. I poured myself a glass of water, scrolled through Instagram for a while, giving him space to get over it. When I finally went to bed, he was lying on his side, facing away from me. I touched his shoulder and he flinched. "Are we really doing this?" I asked. "Are you really this upset over a joke?" He rolled over to face me and his eyes were red. "That's what this is to you? A joke?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have the person you love use your vulnerability as a punchline in front of strangers? I told you about my anxiety around this. I trusted you with something I've struggled with my whole adult life. And you've been making comments for months, and I kept trying to believe you didn't mean them the way they sounded. But tonight you just said it out loud in front of all those people." I felt myself getting defensive, that familiar wall going up. "Oh my God, Marcus, it was one comment. Everyone jokes about sex stuff with their friends. You're completely overreacting." Even as I said it, I knew I was gaslighting him. I knew exactly how many comments I'd made, knew how deliberate they'd been. But admitting that meant admitting I'd been cruel on purpose, and I wasn't ready to look at that. "It's not one comment," he said. "It's been constant. The memes, the little observations, the comparisons. I've been trying to work on this, reading things, seeing if there was something I could fix, and the whole time you've been making me feel like I'm failing some test." He sat up, ran his hands through his hair. "And the worst part is, this is tied to stuff from before, from my ex who used to tell her friends about it, who made me feel like I was broken. I told you about that. I told you how much that hurt, and you're doing the exact same thing. I should have apologized then. That was the moment to acknowledge what I'd done, to take responsibility for the pattern I created. Instead, I said the 6 words that ended us: real men last longer than that." The silence after I said it was deafening. I watched something die in his expression, something that had been holding on, hoping I'd prove him wrong. He got out of bed, grabbed his duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. No yelling, no argument, just methodical movement. Clothes, toiletries, his phone charger. I sat there frozen, oscillating between the urge to apologize and indignation that he was being so dramatic. "What are you doing?" I finally asked, though it was obvious. "I'm leaving," he said, still not looking at me. "I can't be with someone who thinks masculinity is measured in minutes and uses my anxiety as a weapon. I've been trying to tell myself you didn't mean it, that you just had a thoughtless sense of humor, but you mean it. You think less of me because of this, and you've been punishing me for it while pretending everything's fine." He left that night, went to his friend Dave's place. I thought he'd come back after a day or two, once we both cooled down. I sent texts that night, a mix of defensive justifications and half apologies. "I'm sorry you felt hurt, but you're really overreacting to a joke. Can we please talk about this like adults? I didn't mean it the way you're taking it." The next day he responded once: "I need space. Please don't contact me for a while." That while has turned into 3 months. He moved out completely while I was at work, coordinated with my landlord to get his stuff. Clean, efficient, no drama. I've sent probably 50 texts in that time, ranging from angry to apologetic to desperate. He's read none of them. The read receipts sit there, turned off, a wall of silence. My friends rallied around me immediately. I told them a version of the story where I'd made one little comment and he'd completely overreacted and bolted. They fed me lines about dodging bullets, about men who can't handle confident women, about his fragile masculinity. Shauna literally said, if he can't take a joke about his performance, imagine how he'd handle real relationship problems. I nodded along, accepted their support, but I knew I was lying by omission. I knew the version I was telling them was missing the months of deliberate needling, the pattern of cruelty, the weaponization of something he trusted me with. Rachel was the only one who pushed back a little. What exactly did you say? She asked during a coffee date 2 weeks after he left. I tried to brush it off, keep it vague, but she persisted. Because you're really upset and he completely cut you off, which seems extreme if it was just one joke. I told her I'd made a comment about stamina at a party and she just looked at me waiting for more. I changed the subject. I tried to date, downloaded the apps, went on a few terrible outings with men who talked at me instead of with me, who didn't notice small beautiful things, who measured everything in status and performance. I found myself comparing them to Marcus constantly, getting angry at them for not being him, then getting angry at myself for missing someone I'd driven away. One guy, Derek, seemed promising for about 2 dates until he made a self-deprecating joke about being bad at something. I watched myself prepare to file it away, to use it later if I needed leverage, and I had this moment of horrified self-recognition. This is what I do. This is who I am. I drove by Marcus's new apartment once. Didn't plan it, just found myself in that neighborhood and couldn't resist. His car was there, lights on in a second-floor window. I sat in my car for 20 minutes composing and deleting texts, trying to find the combination of words that would make him respond. Finally sent, I see you're doing well, I miss you, I'm sorry for everything. He didn't respond. The read receipt stayed off. My sister called me out last week. We were having dinner and she asked how I was doing with the breakup, and I went into my rehearsed version about his oversensitivity. She put down her fork and said, are you going to tell me the truth or are we going to keep doing this? When I played dumb, she said, you told me about the comments you were making. Months ago, you told me you were making jokes about his stamina and I told you it was mean and you defended it. Don't rewrite history now because it's easier to be the victim. That conversation cracked something open. I went home and reread all the texts I'd sent Marcus over the months before he left, looked at them with honest eyes for the first time. The memes weren't innocent. The comments weren't just observations. I'd been systematically eroding his confidence in an area where he was already vulnerable, and I'd done it consciously enough that I'd watched for his reactions, adjusted my approach to maximize impact while maintaining deniability. I'd treated his trust like a toy, something to play with when I was bored or needed to feel powerful. The worst part, the thing that keeps me up at night, is understanding why I did it. It wasn't about sex or satisfaction or even about him really. It was about me feeling inadequate in every other area of my life. My stalling career, my surface-level friendships, my inability to be vulnerable myself, and finding one place where I could be the one in control, the one with leverage, the one who could make someone else feel small. He was patient and kind and thoughtful, all the things I pretended to be but wasn't. And instead of letting that inspire me to be better, I found the one place he was insecure and pressed on it until he broke. I thought about writing him a real apology, not the defensive non-apologies I'd been sending, but an actual acknowledgement of the pattern of harm I'd created. I drafted it dozens of times, each version getting longer and more detailed as I tried to demonstrate that I truly understood what I'd done. But then I'd read it over and realize I was still centering myself, still making it about my growth and realization, still asking him to do the emotional labor of forgiving me or at least acknowledging my revelation. My mom asked about him last month, whether we were still together. I've been avoiding telling my parents about the breakup, not wanting to explain it. I told her we'd grown apart, mutual decisions, still cared about each other. She said that was very mature. I felt like a fraud. The thing about telling people a false version of events is that you start to believe it yourself, or at least you blur the lines between what happened and what you wish had happened. I caught myself telling someone at work that my ex had commitment issues, and it took me a second after the words were out to remember that wasn't even close to true. He'd wanted commitment. He'd wanted a future. He'd wanted a partner who didn't weaponize his vulnerabilities. I was the one with issues. I saw him 2 weeks ago. Actually saw him, not just driving by his apartment. We were at the same gallery show, the kind of art event our overlapping social circles would both attend. He was with a woman, someone I didn't recognize, and they were looking at a photograph together, his head bent toward hers as he pointed out something in the composition. The same way he'd done with me that first day we met. She laughed at something he said, touched his arm, completely comfortable. He looked happy. Relaxed, nothing like the tense, anxious person he'd become in those final months with me. I left before he could see me, but I spent the rest of the night spiraling, imagining their relationship, wondering if he'd told her about me, about what I'd done. Hoping he hadn't, hoping he had, unable to decide which would be worse. Wondering if she'd be different, better, someone who treated his trust like the gift it was instead of ammunition. The texts I send him now sit in a one-sided conversation thread, dozens of messages he's never acknowledged. I've stopped expecting responses, but I can't seem to stop sending them. They've evolved from defensive justifications to genuine apologies to updates about my life that he never asked for. I'm in therapy now, I sent last week, which is true. I am seeing someone, trying to unpack why I behave this way, why intimacy scares me so much that I sabotage it. I understand what I did to you, I sent 2 days later. I understand why you won't respond and I don't blame you. My therapist asked me why I keep texting him if I don't expect responses. I said something about wanting him to know I'm working on myself, that I recognize the harm I caused. She asked gently whether that was true or whether I was still trying to maintain some connection, some thread that kept me in his life even if only as an unanswered notification. I didn't have an answer. What no one knows, the detail I've never shared with my friends or my sister or even my therapist yet, is what I said after he told me about his ex. When Marcus first told me about his previous relationship, about how she'd shared details about their sex life with her friends and made him feel defective, I said all the right things. I held him, told him she was cruel, promised I would never do something like that. And then 3 weeks before he left, I had drinks with my friend group and told them everything. I described his anxiety, his apologizing, even mimicked the way he'd tried different positions he'd researched. I made them laugh. I performed his vulnerability like a comedy routine, exactly what his ex had done, exactly what he'd trusted me not to do. Shauna was at that drinks night, so was Rachel. They were in the group that laughed. When I fed them the simplified breakup story afterward, they both knew there was more to it, but they went along with the narrative because it was easier. Because calling me out would mean acknowledging they'd participated, that they'd laughed at someone's pain because I'd packaged it as entertainment. That's the thing I can't take back, can't apologize for effectively because he doesn't know it happened. If he found out, it would validate every reason he has for cutting me out. It would prove that the pattern was even worse than he knew, that my cruelty extended beyond private comments into public humiliation. Sometimes I want to confess it to him, just to have everything out in the open, but I know that impulse is selfish too, more about easing my guilt than about his healing. I ran into Dave, Marcus's friend, at a coffee shop last week. He saw me and his expression went cold, not hostile but closed off. I said hi, asked how he was doing, and he was polite but distant. As I was leaving, I turned back and asked, "Is he okay?" Dave looked at me for a long moment and said, "He's better now." The implication was clear: better now that I'm not in his life. Better now that he's free from whatever damage I was doing. That interaction has been playing on repeat in my head. He's better now. I keep trying to be happy about that, to take it as confirmation that leaving was the right choice for him, but mostly I just feel the weight of being the thing someone needed to escape from. I've always thought of myself as a good person, someone who made mistakes but generally meant well. This whole situation has forced me to confront the gap between who I think I am and who my actions reveal me to be. My friends have stopped asking about him, which means they've accepted the breakup as final. They've moved into post-breakup mode, suggesting dating apps and girls' nights and all the rituals of moving on. I go through the motions, but I'm stuck in this loop of understanding what I did, why it was wrong, and having no way to make amends because the person I harmed has rightfully removed me from his life. The worst moments are when I catch myself falling into old patterns with new people. Making mental notes of insecurities, filing away information that could be used as leverage, measuring interactions in terms of power and control. Therapy is helping, I think, but recognizing the pattern doesn't always stop it. I'm learning that awareness and change are two different things, and the gap between them is where the real work lives. I deleted all the photos of us from my Instagram 3 weeks after he left, a small capitulation to finality. But I kept them on my phone, and sometimes late at night I scroll through them, looking for the moment where things shifted, where I started treating his trust like a game. The photos don't show it. We look happy in all of them. That's because the damage I did wasn't visible from the outside. It was in the small comments, the loaded jokes, the systematic erosion of safety that happened in private moments. I wonder if he thinks about me at all. If he's told the woman from the gallery about me, if I'm a cautionary tale in his new relationship. My ex used to weaponize my insecurities, so I really need someone who won't do that. I hope he has those conversations. I hope he's learned to spot the red flags earlier to protect himself better. There's a text I've drafted but never sent, sitting in my notes app: "You were right about everything. I was cruel and it was deliberate, and I did it because I felt powerless in my own life, and making you feel small made me feel bigger. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I hope you found it." I haven't sent it because I finally understand that my apologies, no matter how genuine, aren't about his healing. They're about my need for absolution, and he doesn't owe me that. The irony is that I finally understand what real intimacy requires: vulnerability and trust, and the choice not to weaponize the soft places someone shows you. Only now when I'm alone and he's moved on and there's no one to practice that understanding with. Or maybe that's not irony. Maybe that's just consequence. I'm telling this story now because last night I saw an engagement announcement. Not his, but it shook something loose, made me realize that time is passing and he's building a life, and I'm still stuck in this moment of wanting to fix something that's unfixable. My therapist says I need to forgive myself, but I'm not sure that's actually my work. Maybe my work is just to sit with the discomfort of being someone who caused harm, who drove away something good because I couldn't handle the vulnerability of really being known. People will read this and some will think I'm being too hard on myself, that relationships end and people make mistakes and I deserve compassion too. Others will think I haven't even scratched the surface of accountability, that I'm still centered in my own narrative of growth. Both are probably true. I'm still the same person who turned someone's trust into a weapon, just with more awareness now of why that's unforgivable. The awareness doesn't erase the action. It doesn't bring him back or undo the months of small cruelties. He's not going to respond to this if he somehow sees it. He's not going to read it and decide I've suffered enough or learned enough to deserve another chance. That's not how this works. You don't get to systematically hurt someone and then claim growth as a redemption arc they're required to witness. But I needed to tell the whole truth, to stop hiding behind the version where I made one joke and he overreacted, to admit out loud that I knew exactly what I was doing and did it anyway because hurting him made me feel powerful. So yes, I told him real men last longer. I said it to wound him, to confirm his deepest fears about his adequacy, to punish him for being vulnerable enough to share those fears with me. He moved out because staying would have meant accepting a relationship where his partner used his trust as a weapon. And he won't respond now because he's learned that some people will protect your soft places, and some people will press on them until you break, and he's chosen to build a life with people who do the former. I don't get to be angry about that choice. I get to live with being the person someone had to escape from to be okay.